With Deiveson Figueiredo getting dominated by Cory Sandhagen this past weekend and now is seemingly on the back end of his career, let's wind back to a time where he was a once dominant champion back in his prime era between 2019 and 2020, where he was looking borderline unbeatable up until the Brandon Moreno quadrilogy, which he did eventually lose. However, with that championship run, there are two fights that we never got to see him in. The first was Henry Cejudo, which is primarily down to them being training partners, as well as seeing Henry move up to Bantamweight to fight Dominick Cruz for double champ status at that time. But the other fight, which arguably could have been the greatest fight in Flyweight history, was of course a prime Deiveson Figueiredo versus the greatest flyweight of all time, Demetrious Johnson. Unfortunately, we never got to see this fight because Demetrious Johnson was traded to one championship in 2018 for Ben Askren. What the fuck? And at that time, Deiveson Figueiredo had just beaten Tim Elliott to line himself up for a title shot. Now, this has been the flyweight matchup that has been circulating around the MMA space for almost a year now, and that's what we are here for today. In this mythical matchups video, we are going to be breaking down a fight between the GOAT of flyweight, Demetrious Johnson, versus the bulldozer that was a belt-holding Deiveson Figueiredo, to see who realistically would have won if they fought prime versus prime, with Demetrious Johnson in his 2018 to 2019 era versus Deiveson Figueiredo in his 2019 to 2020 era, with both of them at the championship level. Let's break this matchup down. Demetrious Johnson is easily the most decorated flyweight fighter in MMA history and has been argued as the greatest fighter of all time. And I definitely don't disagree with any of those opinions, because DJ fought 30 times in his career, won 25 of those fights, so he only lost 4 of them and he went to a draw once, and only one of those losses were by a finish, which was by Adriano Moraes, which was to the point where Demetrious Johnson was leaving his prime, and DJ won the trilogy there anyway. So DJ had only actually lost to Henry Cejudo in his prime, which was controversial at that. I actually believe that he won that fight on volume and overall defense, to be honest. And then in his last 2 losses prior, he lost to Brad Pickett and Dominick Cruz, which were both up a weight class early in his career. So the controversial split decision loss to Henry Cejudo aside, he was flawless at flyweight with 11 title defenses overall. And then on the other side, Figueiredo was probably the most menacing fighter to ever hit that flyweight division. He was honestly an absolute monster. He, the same as DJ, has currently fought 30 times in his career, with 1 less win at 24, and 1 more loss, thanks to Cory Sandhagen last weekend, at 5 losses with 1 draw. But as I said, we are analyzing them in their prime eras of 2019 before this loss even occurred. However, the Sandhagen fight did present something that I will jump onto later in this analysis, which will be key. But looking at Figgy's losses, he had only lost once to Jussier Formiga leading into his quadrilogy fight with Brandon Moreno, which the Formiga fight there were definitely holes in his game, but he was also nursing multiple injuries in that fight, to be fair. And aside from the draw with Moreno in the first fight, he was coming out of his prime age range towards the end of that quadrilogy. And Figgy wasn't as accomplished as DJ, but he was able to become a 2-time flyweight champion with 2 title defenses by way of finish within that run. And most importantly, he posed threats like no one else did at the top of that division. Now, touching on those threats that Figgy had that no one else had at the top of the flyweight division, the sheer size of him was a problem, and as a problem, it was a double-edged sword. Figueiredo was huge for flyweight, but that came at a cost, a 40-pound weight cut cost that saw him deplete himself to make weight, which evidently did skew his gas tank at points in his fights, but it also allowed him to outmuscle most and carry more power than most opposition that he actually fought. And in this matchup, Figgy is definitely bigger than DJ overall. Figgy stands at 5'5" tall with a 68-inch reach, cutting a lot more weight than a 5'3" DJ with a 66-inch reach, who cut less than a quarter of what Figueiredo would cut to make weight. Figueiredo was cutting 40 pounds and DJ was cutting less than 10 pounds. He's cutting about 8 pounds per fight. So granted, Figgy is the physically stronger guy, but the stamina and the speed especially are definitely on DJ's side. The pros and cons physically in this fight ultimately depend on the stage of the fight realistically. The physical advantages pull through for Figgy early in the fight with him at his most dangerous, but then the physical advantages pull through for DJ later in the fight where he is going to be the most dangerous. Now, the striking is always the fun part, and just like the physical statistics, both of these do have advantages in their own right. However, it's just a fact that both of these guys have KO power, which we've seen with DJ against Joseph Benavidez, folding him like a fucking lawn chair. And even though Figgy is durable as hell and has actually never been truly finished, he is droppable, which does give DJ a chance with the strike speed he possesses. But realistically, Deiveson is definitely the one with the higher likelihood of getting the KO finish here out of the two of them. He's just so much bigger, has got more natural weight behind his punches, and he's taken out 9 guys in his career with his striking, including John Moraga and Joseph Benavidez. The guy just can't catch a break. So the biggest takeaway here is that within a flat-footed exchange, my money is going to be on Figgy coming out of that on top without a doubt. But that's the thing. Demetrious Johnson and flat-footed will never go in the same sentence. DJ is literally god tier when it comes to his cross-axis movement on the linear and lateral lines. He is just flawless at darting in and out offensively and defensively, and also stringing combinations and moving away from the power side laterally. He is a literal mastermind with the movement, both offensively and defensively, through 25 minutes if it's needed. And aside from the power, this is where Figgy really lags behind. For one, Figgy is a natural orthodox fighter. He loves the quick, snappy left jab with his power right chambered at all times, which is great against like slower or just worse strikers, but DJ is a clean switch stance fighter, which can allow him to use the strike speed out of southpaw much more effectively, making it extremely hard for Figgy to actually counter him because the jab's going to land first, and that strike speed overall is just going to be an issue. I mean, we look at Figgy, he's extremely telegraphed with his boxing style due to the positioning of his hands. He has his left hand out in front of him, which is great for that quick snappy jab, but not good for defense. And then he's got his right arm chambered by his side to just swing for the fences and just get a really nice shot off. But boxing 101 for why this is not ideal, especially against DJ stylistically, is that it leaves him completely open to counter strikes, as DJ can just see the path of the strike because his hands don't move, and defensively, Figgy's hand positioning just leaves the strike defense completely wide open anyway. And don't get me wrong, with Figgy's durability, it's incredible, but against the strike speed of DJ, I mean, the stronger strike accuracy, and not to mention the volume on DJ's side on top of that, DJ statistically, I mean, he is just better. I mean, he also statistically lands double the amount of SIG strikes as well during his UFC tenure compared to Figgy. He lands at about 4 to 5 SIG strikes per minute, and Figgy is about 2 to 3. So that is where Figgy can realistically just get overrun, and that's just down to his poor stance and style that he would ultimately use against DJ. DJ is just a stylistic nightmare from that point of view. And with Figgy being a low output striker, I mean, it's good against some opposition because he does have a lot of power there and it saves his gas tank, and that's provided him a lot of success in a lot of his fights. But stylistically, in this one, DJ is going to be a nightmare to catch, especially as DJ has good natural strike defense on top of that movement. And when it comes to DJ's striking style as a whole offensively, he's really good at mixing high output combinations together between both his punches and his kicks safely. He's very good along the outside, especially using his left body and outside leg kicks, which the leg kicks against Figgy will be okay, as Figgy predominantly puts his weight on his back foot to lunge in with his right hand for maximum damage, but the body kicks that DJ literally always uses is a serious problem for Deiveson Figueiredo. Figgy, look, he's a scary fighter through the first 2 rounds, but he is more humanized through championship rounds, which was directly shown against Brandon Moreno, with his power and his strike defense wilting in that fight. And that's going to come even quicker if his body is getting ripped to bits against Demetrious Johnson, of course, with that body kick being so prevalent. But that being said though, Figgy does have brutal power shots to the body of his own with his own lead left hook. And if that is able to land on DJ while he's circling out to just maximize that impact, I mean, if he's going to be able to utilize that early, cut down the movement and just cut down the overall speed, Figgy has a great chance to not only win this fight, he could chin Demetrious Johnson. And I will say, overall, looking at DJ, he has good clinch-based strikes with knees and good hooks in the exchanges, but wild exchanges anywhere near that kind of range will definitely be in Figueiredo's favor here. Figgy has very nice right-hand strikes with the straights and the uppercuts, and is definitely most comfortable on the front foot, but that's where his strike defense overall does fail him ultimately. And Figgy's best option is to realistically allow DJ to actually push him on the back foot, because Figueiredo has very underrated counter striking, especially with that weight springing from his back foot. And if Figgy is able to counter effectively, cut down the movement of DJ with those body shots, he can definitely win in the striking department. But in all other realms of the striking, with the speed, with the accuracy and the volume, DJ has the advantage in this discipline. Now for the wrestling, I'll start with Figueiredo. Look, the strength advantage is always going to be there for him, and he does some good work with the timing of his takedowns, which he showed against Alexandre Pantoja very well, and he has shown some pretty strong work from the top position. However, his takedown defense is just poor. Like, realistically, it is just poor. And DJ, with a wrestling base first and foremost, that is going to cause issues for Figueiredo keeping this on the feet. Don't get me wrong, that is a great option for him, but I will say a big hole in DJ's game is the physical strength overall, which is traded in for his speed. And we have seen him being taken down by guys like Ian McCall, Tim Elliott, and of course Henry Cejudo as well. And if Figgy could do that, he's definitely got the strength to give DJ issues on top early. But the problem is, aside from the strike defense, wrestling in general is the weakest part of Figueiredo's game, especially defensively. He has a very poor takedown accuracy of 35%, and his takedown defense is literally around that point as well. And that's inclusive of guys that are nowhere near as defensively and offensively adept as in the wrestling department as Demetrious Johnson. And I do believe DJ ultimately will struggle to hold Figueiredo down within the early rounds, especially with the explosivity that Figgy has from his back, which we saw literally Pantoja struggle to hold him down, and even Brandon Moreno at points too. But on the flip side, DJ is just extremely good with his scrambles overall, especially with his Granby rolls to get away from Cejudo. And if Cejudo isn't effectively controlling DJ, Figueiredo does not have a chance. Especially through the later rounds, DJ will find the wrestling to be easier and easier to execute the later the fight goes, round by round by round. And DJ does have the double legs in his arsenal to get this to the ground effectively. So ultimately, the consistent wrestling through the championship rounds with DJ's cardio level is going to be hell for Figgy to deal with late. Now, the grappling is very interesting because on paper, Figueiredo is better overall because he's been a BJJ black belt for much longer than DJ has, and he's got 8 first round submissions out of 9 with only 1 in the second round. But I do hate to say it, his actual submission record is a bit overrated. Most of his submissions came before the UFC against very low level opposition, with only 4 coming from in the UFC, with 2 guillotines against Tim Elliott and Alex Perez, and 2 rear naked chokes against Joseph Benavidez and Cody Garbrandt at UFC 300. And don't get me wrong, they were all great finishes, and the Perez and especially the Benavidez ones were absolutely nasty, but DJ's BJJ in MMA is ultimately just more superior. Demetrious Johnson has a knack of getting pretty insane arm bars with the last second Kyoji Horiguchi finish, and of course the famous Ray Borg flying armbar finish, and then another 2 on top of that, as well as also securing 2 guillotines, a rear naked choke, and a Kimura all in his pro career. So there's a lot more versatility on DJ's side here, and those opportunities would be easier to come the longer the fight goes with the gas tank wilting of Figueiredo, which is what we saw against Brandon Moreno in their second fight, where Brandon Moreno choked Figueiredo out. But that being said, Figgy is no slouch on the ground, especially early. He's got the explosivity, he's got the strength, and he's got the torque in his chokes as well, which if DJ shot for a takedown, there's always a chance that guillotine could sink. But DJ's wrestling is just too superior to have his back taken for a rear naked choke unless he gets dropped. And he's never been subbed regardless with an 8-0 record, so I think a sub in general is just far-fetched for Figueiredo unless it's in round 1 while they're dry and while he hurts Demetrious Johnson. But otherwise, I think DJ definitely has the higher likelihood of finding the submission in the championship rounds if there were to be one at all. So ultimately, it's clear to say, aside from the early round danger presented by Figueiredo's power, his strength, and his explosivity, Demetrious Johnson would have been a tough matchup stylistically for Figgy all round. Figgy, being the bigger guy, works against him in this matchup, with that huge 40-pound weight cut in comparison to DJ, who is cutting literally 8 pounds, and has the wrestling nightmare on top of that too. Speed and cardio, as well as that, is going to be a nightmare on top of that too. So it's clear to say that the footwork and the volume, the cardio, the speed is just a killer against Figgy. But I do believe, most importantly, and channeling back to the Sandhagen loss, the fight IQ is a huge deciding factor in this fight. When we have seen Figgy have some pretty big lapses in judgment against Brandon Moreno, pacing himself too much, and then going leg lock city against Cory Sandhagen and then losing a 50-50. So yeah, realistically, there's a lot of cons for Figgy compared to DJ in this fight. And looking at the fight simulation, I believe in round 1, DJ just utilizes the strike speed, utilizes the movement, really uses the leg kicks, the body kicks on the outside. And I think he's just going to really surprise and catch Figgy off with how fast he actually is. He's faster than anyone he had fought prior. And that's where I think he just takes that first round on volume and possibly gets a bit of control in there with the clinch as well as the takedowns. Now, round 2, I believe this is where Figgy, it's 50-50 realistically, depending on his fight IQ, but benefit of the doubt, I believe Figgy will adjust and get urgent because he knows he can't go late with Demetrious Johnson. He's already lost the first round. This is where I think he gets really, really aggressive, gets really heavy into his striking combinations, really starts stalking Demetrious Johnson down, trying to cut him off just the entire time within that round. I think he's going to be using a lot of his gas tank to defend the takedowns, and he's going to be swinging really heavy, just swinging for the fences. And I think he can clip DJ in an exchange. I mean, Figueiredo isn't slow himself. It's just that DJ is faster, and when he's aggressive and he's using that footwork appropriately, he is dangerous. And I believe he could clip DJ within that round, but DJ, defensive awareness, transitional capabilities, I believe that he can keep himself safe and survive that round. But second round is for Figueiredo. Then rounds 3, 4, and 5, think you know where this is going. DJ, his stamina, his wrestling, and his movement overall against Figueiredo's depleting gas tank will have just him running through for a 49-46 decision, to be honest. And that's just going to further cement himself as the flyweight GOAT. And granted, DJ will be in the most trouble he's ever been in early in that fight, with the power and the explosivity and hopefully the urgency from Figueiredo, knowing if it goes late, he will literally get wrecked by the pace of the wrestling. But I just simply believe that that's exactly what will happen. And if it's not a late submission from Demetrious Johnson, a clear, unanimous decision for Mighty Mouse. Now, I hope you enjoyed this mythical matchup video, and speaking of Demetrious Johnson, if you haven't already checked out my most successful weight class changes in UFC history video, which does include Mighty Mouse, I will leave that on the screen now. And please like, comment, subscribe, it goes a long way for the channel, and I will catch you in the next one.